Keynote this morning works directly with retailers as customers. He is the Global General Manager of Enterprise Search for Google. So please welcome to the stage, Matt Eichner.
Thanks for the introduction, Greg. And it's great to be here at Catalyst 2012. I'd like to start off by saying that this morning we're going to violate a basic principle of mathematics, the axiom of reflexivity. Now, I can almost hear the clicking of some keyboards in the back here trying to out-tweet each other and say, here's the headline. Google guy gets on stage and punches Euclid in the face. Isaac Newton next. So don't hit send. That's not what I mean. So let me clarify. By violating the reflexive property, I mean that it's no longer working in retail the way it used to. And by that I mean your store no longer equals your store. That's right, your store is no longer your store. Now, for those of us working with the online channel, this has been apparent for quite some time. We've long known that the competition is just one click away. It's been very straightforward for them to get there, and frankly, with the advent of multi-tab browsers, we're now in a situation where not only is it one click away, it's probably in the tab right next door to it. But what about the physical retail world? That's where there's quite a bit of change. In the physical retail world, right, we erect these walls. Keep our customers in, keep the competition out. Those walls are no longer working very well. And we spend all this time physically merchandising our product, right? We put stuff here, we put a flow path down, we do planograms, and we try to figure out how to make the most promoted product show up first and control the path that our customers take. Well, all that merchandising is no longer really governing our customer behavior as successfully as it used to. And what about the sales reps, right? We hire these sales reps, we pay their salaries, they're supposed to explain what we're doing. They're supposed to help close those transactions. Well, they're still there, but the sales reps that we're paying are not the only sales reps walking your floor right now. It turns out there's other folks that you're not on your payroll that are walking the same floor. Now, this is not actually the most interesting story. It's definitely one that's a little scary, but the most interesting story to me is what's happening when we take those four walls down and start to imagine the blending together of that online channel, that store channel, and a whole bunch of places we probably didn't even expect to see selling happening. That paints a very interesting opportunity for everyone in this room, and I think we're really just at the very beginning of that transformation in retail, just at the very early innings. And while it's a little uncomfortable, right, it also makes it really exciting to work in this industry and shows a lot of opportunity. So what I'd like to do is take the next 40 minutes or so to talk about why I think that's an opportunity and what we're seeing at Google from a trends perspective in the marketplace and also some of the innovation out there. Now, to simplify the story, I'm going to try to paint these a little bit as pictures. And so, actually, it just reminds me I'm supposed to have this slide changer. I probably should have warned you I'm not a very good artist. Actually, I'm a terrible artist, but these are the pictures. And we start with one dot. And if you look right to left, the intent is to kind of gradually get to a more complex place. By the time we get to that gray shaded mess on the right-hand side, it looks a little bit like Brownian motion. At that point, hopefully you'll agree with me that your store is no longer your store, but you'll also feel kind of excited about what you can do about it. So that one dot example. Oop, there we go, wrong button. The one dot example, this really refers back to the old in-store model. Right? The initial model was kind of a stimulus response model. We used to say the whole goal of advertising was drive someone right into your store, give the minimum amount of advertisement that would encourage them to get there, right? Because it's very hard and expensive to create information in that old world. And then once they're in the store, lock them down, explain what you got, merchandise the product, and close the sale. If you're familiar with the Procter & Gamble terminology, this used to be called the first moment of truth. Right? That first moment of truth was when we got you into the store, we had you locked down, and then we would explain all what the products were about and try to close you. Well, in this world, the single dot world, right, is now fractured. We can't do that any longer because those walls have come down. That said, the same three things are still really important. They haven't changed. We still need to get you informed as a customer. We need to merchandise the product so that you understand what's available and ideally what we would prefer that you buy. And then lastly, we have to close the sale. We have to close the transaction. The only difference is we're going to have to do this in a much more complicated world. So that's the end of our one dot. It was a short story. We're going to move on to two dots, where this gets a little more interesting. So in the 2.0 world, the major change, and this is no shock, is the freedom of information. But it's not just that there's lots of data and there's lots of information out there. This isn't a big data story. This is a story about how easy it is for an end user now to inform themselves about anything and everything using the web. And that continues to get easier, right? And we see that in the types of product searches at Google. We actually see things, people searching on things they never used to search on, like toothpaste, right? Because it's so easy now to find information that even something as mundane as a purchase as toothpaste becomes interesting. Now, sources of information, of course, they're searching on Google. There's advertisements that people see. There's review sites. There's deep sort of analysis sites. There's product FAQs. There's a range of stuff out there. Now, one of my personal favorites, I was actually shopping for a digital camera recently. How many people here have ever heard of dpreview.com? It's mostly just a check to see if anyone's awake. So dpreview.com, Digital Photography Review, it's a site that literally writes a 100-page term paper on every single digital camera. So you can literally go there and any hundreds of models of digital cameras, check them one by one, and there's a 100-page thesis paper on everything about this camera, right? It's got things like barrel distortion readings. It talks about chromatic aberrations and the distinction between different cameras at high ISOs and whether that's going to leave digital artifacts. These are all things I didn't even know existed before I went to dpreview.com. And here, I got all educated and got all excited, and I went to the nearest store and said, let's have a conversation. Let's talk about barrel distortion. The guy looked at me like, what are you talking about? Right? Because the truth is, we can't afford the staff and our physical retail presence to engage that dialogue. And it's getting harder, of course, right, with the pressure and margins in in-store sales. And so what's happening is this trend is accelerating because we can no longer even get that information in the store. It's all happening at the zero moment of truth. So the real question is, are you in the zero moment of truth? And how do you get there? And there's obvious things. There's getting content of use that Google will crawl and becomes a part of our natural search. But it goes beyond that. It's ads, of course. But there's a lot of interesting things that people are doing. Of course, it all starts with search, right? We see that roughly 78% of people are actually searching for information on those products, just like we were doing with the digital camera. But it's not just digital cameras. On the bottom right there is actually that 7.0. These are the number of different sources that people are searching for or looking at before making a purchase decision. And that's home care products, right? It's like toothpaste. So people are actually consulting, on average, 7 sources of information before deciding on Crest or Aquafresh, whatever it might be. It's astounding, right? There was actually a recent study that showed that for moms, 83% of moms watching a television commercial that they find interesting immediately go onto the web and check it out and see what else they can find about that product, right? Just for home care products. And now, if you think about that in a broader context, this means that information is so freely available that there isn't anything that's safe from the zero moment of truth. You have to be in that dialogue. Actually, a really tangible example that I like, this hotel, right, that we're in right now, right, the Mandalay Bay, you may have stayed here last night. It turns out, if I compare that to Bounce dryer sheets, now that sounds like a surprising comparison, but it turns out Bounce dryer sheets has more reviews on the internet. Check me on this, go Google it. Has more reviews on the internet than this hotel has at TripAdvisor.com. Now that's astounding, right? In fact, one of my favorite ones comes from a guy named, I think it's JB, who actually spent the time on Amazon.com to write 2 whole pages. I printed them out because I was so fascinated. 2 whole pages on his experience with Bounce dryer sheets. It's out there, right? It's out there and you've got to be engaging with it. Now, like I said, there's more than just ads and there's more than just content through natural search. Who here is familiar with the Will It Blend series? Okay, more people are waking up, I can see from the raising of hands. We'll do this a couple of times and hopefully by the end it'll be very energetic. Will It Blend, right? Here's a video the guy put together blending all kinds of things as if almost like a little mini TV series, pumped it onto YouTube, which it turns out is the #2 search engine in the world by usage. And all of a sudden, right, he's built himself this amazing brand around Will It Blend and his blenders. Now, there's an episode of this where they do the iPhone and they blend it up. Since I'm from Google, I felt that wouldn't be really appropriate, so I actually searched for Will It Blend on the Android. There it is, about to get destroyed. Now, as shocking as it might be that someone would give up an Android phone to a blender, I find it shocking. It turns out, even more shocking, at least to me, is that this series has been seen over 300 million times by over 300 million different people. since its inception. Now, to put that in context, that's something akin to the number of people who will visit eBay last year. It's absolutely an enormous amount of exposure for this company, all from a video they paid nothing for, right? At least not to Google anyway. They didn't pay to advertise it. Pretty incredible. Now, there are other more mundane strategies to get onto YouTube and make some press or make some noise out of it. One easy example, we actually ran a trial in Germany with advertisers who took ads that they were running on television anyway, and then just plopped them onto YouTube. We found is actually the audience reach was an incremental 3.4% of audience, right? Audience they weren't getting, and about 64% of that audience had not prior seen the advertisement on television. So sort of an interesting or easy strategy to kind of get you that exposure. But this is all talking about, will it blend and things, you know, from my generation, TV, right? But if you've got kids, you're probably thinking more like this. So this is actually a picture of Lady Gaga's 2010 video for her new song, The Telephone. If I probably asked for a raise of hands here, I'd get probably fewer of them is my guess. So I'm not going to bother. But what's interesting is at the end, if you had watched the whole video, which I did, there's actually a young lady there who ends up with yellow eyeshadow. She doesn't really do anything other than just have this yellow eyeshadow. So I personally can't figure out why she's in the video. Don't understand the whole thing, frankly. But you know, my main thought was, geez, I just hope my kids don't grow up and wear yellow eyeshadow. Now, that was my thinking. But what do you think happened on Google.com search? So if your answer was that on Google.com search, searches for yellow eyeshadow spiked right after this video aired, you're right. The nice thing is that Google Search Insights, right, or Insights for Search, I should say, you know, obviously makes this very clear. You can see in the chart this huge spike of traffic all about yellow eyeshadow. And of course, what that means is that, you know, the kids were thinking the exact opposite of what I was thinking, right? This fuddy-duddy parent type guy. The kids are all thinking, dude, how do I get that hot look I saw in the latest video? I've got to get it. They went out and searched for it, which means they're telling you. They're telling you, right, in that zero moment of truth, I want this. The question is, are we listening? Now, the good news is we actually are seeing advertisers start to listen, right? So the obvious thing, if you're a marketing person or a merchandiser and you're sitting at a cosmetics company, is you want to make sure you're in that dialogue. You want to get in that zero moment of truth in real time, right? So if you're the first one there and you're bidding on ads now at Google, you're getting that better price and you're actually getting in front of people when the spike happens, right? So the speed is really important here and sort of getting into that dialogue. So where have we been, right? If we think about what we've done so far here, we fractured the one dot world. That was easy, right? But then we had to replicate or create again the same functions of that one dot world in a more complex environment. The first one we hit, right? We said, well, it's okay. We can't inform those customers in our four walls any longer. But what we can do is we can learn from what they're saying in the zero moment of truth. We can hear that through the search signals, and we can respond, right, with getting involved in that dialogue in the zero moment of truth, or the ZMON, as I'll call it going forward. So that's great, right? We've got ads, we've got content that we can put up there. We have video, and in fact, I didn't mention this, but of course, there's a tremendous amount of social sites, whether it's Facebook or Google Plus, to help connect or get into that dialogue. So we've got a lot of ways to do it. Now, let's talk about four dots with lots of arrows. That's the best way I can describe that one. 4 dots with lots of arrows. What this is really about is the complexity of merchandising is increasing. So this chart, which has these 3 bands on it, is basically a depiction of US retail. Now, Europe would look very similar. Now, at the bottom there, we have this nice blue wedge, and it's growing. Its growth is actually muted a bit because of the scale of the diagram. I should clarify that I've removed chunks of US retail that I think will never go online. Things like gasoline. Well, I'll probably be proved wrong on that, but I hope it doesn't go online anytime soon. So this is actually that net of those chunks. So if you look at this blue wedge, that reflects the roughly $200 billion today in US retail e-commerce, growing at roughly 20% per year, depending on which studies you're looking at. That's fast. For many of us, that's our fastest growing store, right? In fact, for many of us, it's also our biggest store. So we could just look at that online channel and say, we've got to get that right. We've got to make that a compelling user experience. But merchandising just for online, turns out, isn't really the whole story. Because actually, if you think about the online channel, it's a little bit like the zero moment of truth for your physical store, right? What are people doing? They're going online, and this red wedge in the middle is web influence retail. So they're hitting your online site, right? And by 2014, upwards of 71% of them are going to go there first to that online site and then transact in your store. To put that in perspective, Best Buy recently estimated that roughly 80% of their in-store traffic starts on their public website. Checks out the product there, then makes the decision, will they go to the store? Huge change, right? Absolutely huge change and growing. You can see the sort of gray wedge, which is the sort of remaining chunk of retail that mysteriously has no impact from the online site, is shrinking, as you'd imagine. So what do we do about it? So at Google, one thing that we're trying to do is help you consolidate all of that complex product information, that tornado of data, and move it into a consistent, what we call the Google Merchant Center, so that you can then put it out to all the different channels consistently, right? Whether it's pumping it into an ad, we've got a range of different formats there, looking at it in the context of Google Product Search, or putting it on your own site with Google Commerce Search, or putting it into a catalog. Could be a digital version of one you have physically or one that never made it to the real world, right, but ends up only in digital. So let's imagine another analogy. Let's imagine that I'm the head of a toy store, and I'm looking to merchandise that new product line I have for the Transformers figurines. Well, the first thing I might do is get back to my ads and say, well, if there's a ZMod out there, if there's a zero moment of truth, I'd like to merchandise my product there rather than just having these text ads. So you can make a much richer ad experience by pumping that product data right into the ad, dropping it down in an expanded format, and now you're much more likely to get those clicks. But that's ads, right? What I also want to do is get involved in the natural search, in the Google Product Search. And of course, that same product data can be used also in Google Product Search. So here we're seeing actually a Google Product Search actually being executed, and you can kind of squint. It's a little small, but you've got a little Transformer figurine on the bottom left there. Now the interesting thing is this is also a depiction of Google Instant. So I haven't hit enter yet on this search. To take my word for that since it's a bit static on this slide. But I haven't hit enter. In fact, I've only typed a few letters, T-R-A, and you can imagine the ellipses and the time. And within milliseconds, Google has decided, hey, you know what? I think you mean Transformers. And you can see it because on the bottom of the screen, the most relevant products being lifted up are the Transformers figurines. That's really cool, right? I mean, immediately within those milliseconds. And the search suggestions themselves have already said 2 of the 4 search suggestions are Transformers. Now, to put that in context, let's ask the question, how on earth did Google know that? It turns out these 3 figurines represent what is really only 17,000 possible results on Google Product Search. A very small subset. If I just took the 4 search suggestions, so not every possible completion of TRA, of which there are thousands surely. If I just took the 4 that were in the search box suggested by Google, you'd actually get 5 million results. And you can see that, right? If you look down in the bottom left and do this at home, you'll see there's things like, you know, voltage transformers and all kinds of technical equipment. Not surprisingly, there's an awful lot of those, right? So 5 million things, actually very many more than 5 million, and all of a sudden Google comes up with this surge that says, boom, it's got to be Transformers action figures. Now, if you've got kids, this is going to make sense to you, because your boys are probably thinking, duh, this is the #4 highest grossing movie of all time, and it just launched in the last quarter of last year. Of course it's Transformers figurines. And the real trick here, right, is that Google actually sees all those queries coming in, billions of them, and kind of parse them apart and say, you know, based on user behavior, we're pretty sure what you mean with TRA, ambiguous as it is a Transformer figurine, which makes a big impact on people's likelihood to engage in that 0 moment of truth and to engage with your merchandise product. Now that's Google's product search. But it turns out we have the same problem across multiple channels. This is not just a single channel story. And you can do the same thing in your online site. So now you can actually take the power of all that cloud insight, or the wisdom of the crowds, if you like, from Google.com, and paste it right onto your actual e-commerce site as an enterprise customer of Google. So this is actually Hasbro.com. They're running Google Commerce Search. This is a totally redone Google Commerce Search, right? We actually completely revolutionized the entire product line in the past year and a half. And what this means now is it's running on Google.com infrastructure. And so as I type in TRA at Hasbro.com, it immediately gets it, right? It knows, hey, dude, that's right. This is the Transformers movie. I gotcha. It's going to give me all those search suggestions, just like at Google.com product search. It's going to get the relevance dead on, right, without anyone having to touch the thing. Which means that as trends change, right, as those yellow eyeshadow queries come in, your relevance, well, there's probably no yellow eyeshadow at Hasbro, but your relevance will change. It will actually adapt to the environment in real time, almost as if you're watching Insight for Search constantly, just hitting the refresh button and then running over to your relevance algorithm to make it work. Of course, you don't have to do that because you've got Google.com. Now, The other nice thing about this, we've changed the product, of course, that you can merchandise, because we know that merchandising across channels isn't just relevance. It means, for instance, at Hasbro, this is very subtle, there's that little pink strip in there, and what they wanted to do was expose that they own Transformers.com. And if you really want to get into ZMOT, they'd rather you get into their ZMOT, which is learn all about Transformers and get all geeked up on the site. And so they're merchandising the Transformers.com site right there in that pink wedge. And that's one example of merchandising. Of course, if you take this idea that search is the starting point, which it often is in our e-commerce sites, just like it is at google.com for the ZMOT, then ultimately what you want to do is watch those insights for search that you're getting in your web logs and change the site behavior so when someone searches on Transformers, if they happen to hit enter, that what they see is a branded area, right, with a banner that's all about Transformers and feels like a landing page, right? And this is what I mean when I say merchandising is getting harder, but we're getting some tools to work with it. We can actually get very dynamic and respond to what users are asking for. But like I said, this is a story about multiple channels. So what we'd like to do is actually connect all this to our other channels. We think that's a great idea. And some of the retailers out there are actually starting to connect those dots. Now here's an example where someone's trying this, right? So I'm searching, in this case, for red lipstick, right? So I search for red lipstick on the top left, and then at some point, I find the lipstick that I want, and I say, this is great. And the cool thing, because they're connecting us to the offline channel, to their physical stores, is I can type in my zip code and immediately get an answer. Is this available in stock in the store that I want to go to try it on, to see if I like it? Now, the sad part of this particular story is it doesn't end well. This lipstick is not available in the store that I want. The question you're going to face is, have you just encouraged your buyer to get excited about something that they can't get? Right? This is a terrible experience, and if we think about a real omni-channel world, a real multi-channel merchandising strategy, we'd like for the sales rep that engages with that customer across those channels to not recommend that they get all excited about this red lipstick, and then immediately go, oh, darn, can't get it. Because it kind of puts them back into reassessment mode. They might leave our store, they might actually find that red lipstick at some competitor store that has it in stock, which is not a great outcome for us. So one of the challenges that this idea of cross-channel behavior creates, or merchandising consistently, is how do we make sure that the suggestions that we're offering, whether it's in the search relevance algorithms, whether it's the search suggestions coming down from the query box, or the menus on the left-hand side, are all in context with the user's channel experience, how they see us. Now luckily, this is the exact kind of problem that the Google Merchant Center and Google Commerce Search were designed to solve. So we have, if you're already up with this, your local feeds. We have your local inventory coming into Google Product Search. Highly recommend that you do that. And you can take that same local inventory now and put it together with all the other information you're sending Google Commerce on Google Merchant Center on your product data, and now merchandise consistently, which means that if you take this example, someone might select, I want to know it's in stock nearby me as an option. And all of a sudden, all of the results on that page are merchandised consistently. The search results will not bring back things that would suggest that you go find red lipstick that doesn't exist at the store you're going to. Further, the menus will contract to only suggest faceted navigation options, again, that are consistent with what you've chosen. So we're not going to kind of push you towards something that you can't get. That's really critical, and you can think about expanding that, right? Imagine I'm putting together this pocketbook and I'm looking to create recommendations that go along with the pocketbook. Maybe it's a wallet that matches that pocketbook. Again, I don't want to kind of get my recommendations engine to suggest a product that doesn't fit with the product I'm about to buy because I can't get it at the same store. I'd like, ideally, for everything that I'm touching the customer with to actually have this cross-channel ability. And this could be across thousands of stores, right? So the level of infrastructure required to support a query across thousands of stores times your whole product inventory times changing availability on a 15-minute window basis, pretty incredible. And of course, Google brings that back in milliseconds. Now, there's other places we could use that same kind of computing power from google.com. Another good example is look and feel. This is a real hard problem, as it turns out, and I say this with some acknowledgement. It's particularly hard for me because I'm not very good with style. My wife actually dressed me yesterday. But I really have a hard time, and I think most of us do, coming up with a standard vernacular for how to describe clothing, for instance, or any of the soft goods, right? I mean, this is a jacket. I could probably get more detailed than that, but past a certain point, very hard for me to describe it with any confidence that you might describe it or you might describe it in exactly the same way, right? So we might merchandise this, we might put some words in there, but what's the likelihood that we get the right ones or that all of our customers have those same words? We all know this in retail, right? And in fact, the one that comes to mind for me for this dress is sexy, but it's not even in the description. So I would have failed on that one. Now the cool thing is we can apply that same power of computing infrastructure and algorithms to get all the dresses that match a certain look and feel, even if no words are involved. So Google can now look at those dresses with Commerce Search and literally look at them like you would as a human being and say, that's cool. You know, here's the ones I think actually match your interest. Now, if we like these, we might put them together and compile them into a catalog. And this gets back to our other channel. And this is the lipstick example again. Put them all into a catalog. It could be a physical one we're sending out, or it could be just virtual. And this is where something like Google Catalogs now gets you that distribution to all the different devices out there, the Android devices, and of course the iPads. And so people can literally flip through those catalogs without ever having to wait for the mail. And frankly, without you having to go create bulk order and bulk catalogs. So if we take all this together, right, what we're seeing is there's this need to really merchandise our products everywhere. Right? We're no longer thinking about merchandising for just the physical store, or merchandising for an online channel and then separately for an offline channel, right? Because there's really just this huge plethora of new channels coming together, and really it's the same user across all of them. And the second thing we're seeing, and I'm calling this searchandising, is that taking a cue from what's happening in the zero moment of truth, users are approaching us with intent. And typically they're finding the answer to that intent by running to the search box, or running to the most dynamic and quickest thing on your site. And so it's really important not just to think about merchandising across those channels, but to think about merchandising in response to what's happening in the insight for search on your site. So here we are, we've actually found that the in-store model is fractured, but we know how to inform people, and we know how to merchandise across all these channels. Now we get to the gray shaded mess, right? This Brownian motion. So what do we do here? Well, in order to talk about this, we've got to introduce a new player. And that new player, which we gave a brief cameo at the beginning, is this little guy. Mobile is a very little thing that changes everything. And by this, I don't just mean that we have mobile sites, right? I mean, obviously, the easy stats are smartphones surpassing in Q4 2010 shipments of PCs. Huge, right? But that's passé. We're now talking about things like iPads passing PCs, right? So they're getting lapped. That's not really the big deal. We could talk about consumer behavior. I actually love these mobile stats. I'm guilty. I'm trying to decide if I'm going to admit I'm guilty of the third one, but let's just talk it through. The first one I'm definitely guilty of, right? We just saw it. My mobile phone is always within 3 feet of me. That's the average for consumers. Checking it 40 times a day. I bet if I were to take a poll in this audience, it's probably somewhat higher. I'll admit that mine is, I don't know what the number of digits would be to get to the number of times I check my mobile phone, but it's there and it's on. This last one, the third one that I'm not sure if I'm going to admit to, but it's 1 in 4 people use their mobile phone while in the bathroom. I'm going to submit that probably 2 in 4 are lying. And then the fourth stat, that 2 in 3 people literally sleep right next to it, right? It's at their bedside. Guilty. So consumer behavior has totally changed, right? And one way to interpret that is that we're getting massive growth in mobile queries, and we can show that, right? At Google.com, we saw in the past 3 years an over 30-fold increase in mobile queries specifically for product data. So specifically for product data, people are approaching their mobile devices, and there's some interesting trends behind that. For instance, we see that mobile query volume spikes on the weekends and actually surpasses PC query volume at various points. And a lot of that's just people, they just don't have their computer in front of them. They may be watching TV, they might just be sitting on the couch and they don't feel like getting their computer booted up. Range of reasons, but it means that mobile is actually a verifiable platform now to develop for. And one way to treat that is to say, I need a mobile channel. Right, I had online, and I had the physical retail store, I had catalogs, and I have the ZMOT, now I got mobile, right? There's 5. Sure, and if you treat it that way, you'll think that it's very critical to get the user experience right. And you're right, it's not like an online store, right? There are things that are very different about mobile. First off, the search experience is totally different. People actually overwhelmingly use search on mobile, even more so than they do on a regular online site, because you can't really see a lot of stuff on that tiny screen. So you end up having to use the search box to get there. And things like search suggest become incredibly important, because I'm only going to type 1 or 2 or 3 things. And in some sense, you can imagine putting search as you type on your mobile device as being a way to save people from car accidents, right? Because I'm probably typing that while I'm driving and trying to figure out not to hit someone. And hopefully the search suggest comes back because I'm not really paying attention to either of the things I'm doing. So you could think of it that way. But it turns out there's other problems with the mobile UX, right? There's spell correction. And there's very weird spell corrections, right? We see billions of these at Google, so we have this interesting insight, you know, where you don't get the phonetic, and it makes sense. You don't get the phonetic mistakes. You don't get the ones where people probably just didn't know how to spell the word. You get words that make no sense, right? You get words that you know the person was driving, trying to get their cup of coffee, talking to their kid, and they got this little slider they can't feel the buttons on, and the two buttons that are adjacent, and you get like 10 consonants in a row, right? You get very bizarre spelling mistakes. You need to fix those, right? You need to actually offer them an answer for those spelling mistakes, even though they're weird and make no sense. So it's very different than mobile. And of course, you know, without saying almost, it's local, right? So I'm wandering around and I have a GPS in my device, and you should probably figure out where I am and respond to that, because I expect it, right? I can see where I am, right? How come you can't? So these are all different about mobile. And we could treat it like a channel, and of course I'd suggest it's really important to get these right. But that's not even the big story. This is the big story about mobile. This is where all the walls come down. 68% of people between the ages of 18 and 34 use their mobile device in your store while shopping at your store, and they're looking at someone else's, or they're looking at your online site, not your which. 68%. And if it's 18 to 34, right, it's getting even more in the younger generation. So you can imagine this sort of tipping towards 100% in the coming years, right? We're still at the beginnings of this thing. That is a massive change in consumer behavior. Now, the good news is we're prepared, right? We've got our ZMOT. We're talking to these guys before they come to the store. They're in the dialogue. We've merchandised our product consistently across all channels, right? So we've got it in Merchant Center, and we've got the ability to understand their location, to put all those recommendations and search results all in context of that query so that we're actually answering the question and preventing them from going to someone else's store. That's great, right? Because what's really happening, you can see this in the pocketbook example, is that same person now is seamlessly merging across your environments, right? This is now an open playing field. There is no real channel anymore, unless you want to call it an omni-channel, right? This big fuzzy shaded region that people migrate back and forth from, but they're never really completely in one or the other. That's really what's happening here. The good news is we can handle it. And there's been some great stuff, you know, that's happened with mobile sites. I'd say that one of the things that's lacking, or one of the things that we see as a real opportunity, is not just to have the site and not just to do it well, but to encourage people to use it. Because the truth is, they're going to be in your store, and if they're in your store, they're going to either use your mobile site to get that extra information, to carry the ZMOT with them, or they're going to use someone else's, right? They might use Google Goggles, they might use Amazon. It's going to be someone else's or yours. So, you know, we've seen some early adopter type ideas around this. One example would be Best Buy putting QR codes all over their stores. So I'm sure most people have seen this. If you've gone to a Best Buy, you can look at a label, and those labels never had very much information. It was always kind of frustrating as a customer to try to figure out what they meant. Well, now, you can go to that little label with this tiny bit of information, and you can scan the QR code, and boom, you've got the whole ZMOT right in your hand. And that's great, but it's a little subtle. How do you even know that mobile application exists? Would you really use Best Buy's, or are you tempted to use someone else's at that moment if it's easier? So there's been some other cool stuff. This is another great example I like. This is a store in the UK, and what they've done is made it very bold and very clear what they want you to do. They want you to get their mobile app. They're proud of it. It works. Please use our mobile app. And the nice thing is you don't have to go into the store, right? Because you might be walking by, see the window, and go, that's kind of cool, as a few of these people did. And they say, well, I'd love to see that product, but I don't have time for it right now. Snap the product, put it in my pocket, walk along. Perhaps I go to a coffee shop, maybe I meet some friends, and there I am, discussing what I just saw at the store. It's in my pocket, sharing it with my friends. This brings up a great opportunity for social. If you're wondering how does social fit back into the story, it's an awesome opportunity now to tell people about what's going on in your store and have them take it out into the real world, if you will. So here's what I mean when I say selling everywhere. This idea that there's no longer a channel, but just one omni-channel, is you're in the store, and here's an example from Diesel Jeans, and they've got these QR signs up. They're encouraging fairly boldly, go scan this thing, tell your friends. Go like it on Facebook. Go +1 it on Google, right? And maybe the next selling environment for this story is that I get together with my friends and we do a Google Hangout where we're on video and we're all chatting about it, and I bring up the QR code scan that I just did and say, what do you think? Should I get these jeans? Right? Great. So now you're selling inside of someone's video conversation. But it doesn't just end there. When I say selling everywhere, we have to ask ourselves, what's this guy doing? Now this looks simple enough, right? Here's a person who is staring at what seems like some soft drinks. He's got his mobile phone up there, so maybe he's thinking, I'll check the calorie information, or I'll get a feel for, is this something I want to buy? Like I said, Zmot's everywhere, right? So people actually do this, even though we never used to. However, there's actually something else going on here. So this guy's in a subway station. Kind of have to squint and change your mind frame a bit, but that's the back wall of a subway station, and those are just billboards. Those are billboards with QR codes and pictures, because it turns out that in South Korea, the 4 walls of retail inside of groceries were owned by someone else, and Tesco didn't like that. Tesco didn't like that story. They liked the other story, whereas it's an omni-channel, and frankly, we don't need 4 walls the way that you typically conceive them. So selling anywhere means they can paint this picture on the backside of a subway wall while I'm waiting for the next train, and there's multiple of these, so if I have multiple stops, I can keep shopping. I just scan these, put them into my mobile phone, and then Tesco delivers them to my house. Talk about circumventing the physical retail channel, and that by a physical retailer, no less. Pretty compelling when we talk about closing the sale, in an open environment. But why stop there? Now, we've all seen the Geek Fest that came out with QR codes, in the last few years, and everyone was all proud to display their big QR code on their T-shirt, and, okay, fine. I mean, for some of us, that's kind of cool, and I'm one of them, I admit it. But that's not the real world, most likely, for our customers. But the idea is still intact, right? This QR code thing, and the fact that I'm walking around with it makes a whole new selling channel. It doesn't have to be as sort of ham-handed as sticking something on a lapel over in a very visible sense. Now, one way to solve that is you stick it on the tag in your back. Another way to do it is you could actually use an NFC chip. Berg Research actually estimates that NFC-enabled phones will reach about 700 million units in the wild by 2016. I think there's something in the order of 50 to 100 million right now, but it's growing so quickly that it depends on the day you get that survey, right? So 700 million NFC devices, just stick a NFC-compatible thing in there that's waterproof and washproof, and boom. You no longer have to display that. Someone can just walk up and say, cool, I like it. How might that work? Well, this is a suit that I like. Maybe no one else likes it, but someone else might walk up and say, I like your jacket. And on the inside label of my jacket, there's actually a little tag that says, here's who made it for me. If it's a custom suit, it might be a custom clothier. Why not stick a QR code there? And so while we're chatting, you say, nice suit, and I say, go right ahead, So you can scan that suit, and now we're talking about commerce, out in the open. And this is funny, but this actually used to happen. There was a time back in Wall Street when everyone used to walk around, and I forget the name of the tie, because I'm not very good with fashion, but there was a particular tie that was like $500, and the sign of success in Wall Street was, were you wearing one? People literally used to go and flip each other's ties over in the elevators and say, do you have one? Right, so this actually happens even with guys, as it turns out. So here we are, we've got this tag, I'm scanning it. It could be because a friend or someone who just saw me in the hall said that's cool and they want it. But it could also be, maybe I forgot my own clothing. This happens all the time, where it's, you hold the clothing for 2-3 years, you want to get another piece of it. You don't want to go to the store, or sometimes you go to the store, they don't have it. It's very frustrating for me because my sense of style, as you can tell, never changes. It's like a time capsule. And so I routinely find myself 3 years after the initial purchase wondering, how do I get the pair of jeans that I like, which no longer exist? And one of the nice things, if I had this QR code, I would just scan it off the label. Well, of course, it might be out of date, right? They no longer stock that. But now let's think back to the integration of all these channels. If I'm using Google Commerce Search, I've got Find Similar by style and color. So you as the retailer, having put all of your information in Merchant Center, could satisfy the QR hit by saying, well, look, this is out of stock. We don't do this anymore, but here's 10 ideas. If you want, you can come to the store because they're in stock in these places, or maybe you'll close it on your mobile phone. Perhaps you're using Google Wallet, and that's integrated with your application, in which case closing on the mobile phone doesn't require me to fat finger in 16 digits, which I'm guaranteed to get wrong, but instead it's like a one-click purchase. I say, that's great. That's exactly the suit jacket I was looking for. Close enough. I'm a guy. What is the difference to me? Click on it. Boom. It's in my purchase, and I'm done. Tying all this together, right? Or if for whatever reason we determine, you haven't purchased that thing in a while, and it's been a while since you looked at it, having scanned that QR code because we've probably got a cookie running for you. We probably know who you are, right, as a retailer. I might make the decision, I need to get an incentive. I need to get them into my store because they're not going to buy on their mobile phone even though they saw the picture. Google Wallet again, why not distribute a coupon? You wait for that day, give them the 10% off, and say, come into XYZ store, it's here on the shelf in inventory, and come on and take a look, right? And we'll give you 10% off. This is what I mean by selling everywhere. You should be thinking, any place that you see people, it's possibly a selling floor, right? That includes social, It includes conversations. It includes me, myself, believe it or not, just selling myself on the thing that I hope I can find again in 3 years. And it means that you can be prepared by, as we were talking, to engage in this, by basically informing everyone in that zero moment of truth, having your content out there, advertising to get it into the dialogue, working with the video resources, right? Working with everything that's out there to make sure you're engaging in that dialogue in real time. I would encourage even that you actually establish a zero moment of truth director, someone who's thinking about the holistic problem of putting this together, what was otherwise this fractured experience. But it also means you're merchandising everywhere. And what I'm calling searchadising, right? Responding to people searching on your websites, responding to people searching on their mobiles, and tying it together so that you can get to this, I'd say this to some degree, of a hollow moment, which looks like an ugly brown, or rather an ugly gray splotch with lots of brownie and motion yellow dots in it. But this hopefully good endpoint where we say, you know what? The walls have come down. It's one big omni-channel, and there's a lot of kinetic energy in there, but we're prepared. We've got the tools to explore this. So like I said, we're at the early innings of this whole thing, and there's a lot of stuff that we'll all learn together as it unfolds. I hope we keep that dialogue open, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you over time. In the meantime, hope you enjoy the rest of the conference, and thanks very much for your attention.